Every case begins with a crime scene, a report, a victim, and a story told by those who were there. But sometimes what's not in the report, or what a witness didn't say, can be more telling than the official narrative. We're opening a new file today, a case that, on the surface, appears straightforward, a sudden disappearance, an isolated location, and a timeline that, when you begin to examine it closely, doesn't quite add up. Our focus today is not on who committed a crime, at least not yet. Instead, we're going to look at the sequence of events, the precise moments recorded, or perhaps deliberately omitted. Because when the official account leaves gaps, those gaps become open questions. And in this investigation, the questions begin almost immediately. The initial report states that Sarah Jenkins was last seen at her cabin in rural Blackwood County around 10 p.m. on October 27th. But an anonymous 911 call, logged at precisely 10:03 p.m., describes a vehicle, a dark sedan, speeding away from that very same location. That's 3 minutes. A small window perhaps, but a critical one. How much can genuinely happen in 3 minutes? And why does no official record of this 911 call appear in the initial police briefing? This discrepancy, this almost immediate divergence between what was reported and what was documented, is where we start. Let's look at the evidence, piece by piece. Witnesses disappear. The missing hour, that critical gap between when the 911 call was logged and when officers reportedly arrived on scene, isn't just a discrepancy, it's a void. When this type of timeline anomaly occurs, one has to ask, what transpired in those unseen minutes? The official report states that Officer Miller and Officer Jones responded to a domestic disturbance, their dispatch time, 10:32 p.m. However, patrol car GPS logs, which are often overlooked in initial investigations, paint a different picture. Those logs confirm both vehicles remained stationary at their precinct until 10:47 p.m. That's a 15-minute delay, not a logistical oversight, but a deliberate waiting period. Why? The report offers no explanation. No mention of a prior engagement, no details of equipment checks, nothing to suggest a legitimate reason for holding back. This silence, in fact, speaks volumes. An investigation typically moves on the assumption of procedural accuracy, but here, the procedure itself seems to be intentionally obscured. This isn't just bad record-keeping. This suggests a deliberate narrative adjustment. And that detail matters, because it forces us to reevaluate every subsequent entry in the official record. What else doesn't line up? The empty apartment. The first witness was a night watchman, John Davies, who reported seeing a blue Ford pickup truck leaving the area around 2:00 a.m. His statement outlined the vehicle having a broken taillight. Then, just hours later, a second witness, store clerk Emily Hayes, described a similar truck, also blue, with a broken taillight, at a gas station roughly 5 miles from the crime scene, depositing a large, oddly shaped bag into a dumpster. This was around 2:30 a.m. Two separate accounts, both detailing a blue pickup with a specific identifiable defect within a tight window. That's a strong lead. Yet, neither of these detailed witness statements made it into the initial police report. They were relegated to supplementary notes, almost as if an attempt was made to keep them from becoming prominent. What doesn't add up is why information this precise, corroborating each other, would be overlooked. The official version leaves this unexplained, and the absence of these witnesses in the primary documentation significantly alters the early investigative focus. That detail matters, casting a shadow on the thoroughness of the initial inquiry and raising questions about what else might have been deliberately downplayed or ignored. Broken alibis. The apartment itself revealed little beyond a meticulously kept space. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Everything seemingly in its place, but that's where it gets strange. The official report notes a single unnerving detail, a half-eaten meal on the dining table, left as if the occupant intended to return momentarily. A pizza, specifically, still warm to the touch according to the first officer on the scene, and a TV still on, tuned to a local news channel. This suggests a sudden, unexpected departure or an interruption. What doesn't add up is the fact that the apartment keys, wallet, and phone, items one would instinctively grab if leaving, were all found undisturbed on a small table near the front door. The evidence suggests a rapid, unplanned exit, yet critical personal effects were left behind. This raises an important question. If the departure was so urgent, why were these essential items not taken? The timestamp on the police logs shows the discovery around 11:30 p.m., yet the pizza, still warm, indicates a much more recent presence. This discrepancy in the timeline demands further scrutiny. It's a small detail, but in an investigation, every detail matters. Surveillance blind spots. The alibis as presented were clearly broken. But here's where it gets strange. The initial police report filed by Officer Miller made no mention of these discrepancies or the outright contradictions we've just reviewed. This document, officially designated as Report 74B, focused almost entirely on the victim's background and the state of the crime scene itself. It details the precise dimensions of the room, the type of entry wound, and even the brand of coffee found on the table. However, it completely omits the conflicting statements given by the three individuals present, Mr. Henderson, Ms. Davies, and Mr. Chen, despite interviews having been conducted just hours after the incident. That omission isn't a small detail. Officer Miller noted in his personal log, which we've obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, that he specifically flagged the inconsistent timelines for further investigation. Yet that flag, that critical observation, never made it into the official report 74B. The question then becomes, why? What motive or instruction would lead an experienced officer to redact or simply omit such crucial initial findings from the primary investigatory document? This raises an important question. Why would the official record present a sanitized view of the immediate aftermath? The contradictory report. The absence of footage isn't just an inconvenience here, it creates a critical blind spot, forcing us to rely solely on disparate accounts. This is where cross-referencing becomes paramount. We have witness statements, some official logs, and a trail of digital breadcrumbs that could fill the gaps. Let me walk you through what happened immediately after the alleged disappearance. One witness, a security guard, stated seeing the subject leave the premises at 11:03 p.m. However, his shift log, which we obtained through a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, records him taking a break between 10:55 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. That's a 20-minute window during which he claims to have seen something, but his own record indicates he was not at his post. This isn't a small inconsistency, it's a direct contradiction regarding a crucial moment when the subject was last seen leaving a supposedly secure area. That detail matters, because if the security guard's account is unreliable, then our last confirmed sighting rests on questionable grounds. What doesn't add up is why this discrepancy wasn't flagged earlier. It points to a superficial review of the evidence, or perhaps a deliberate oversight. We need to go back and check the record, cross-referencing every reported observation with documented presence or lack thereof. The official version leaves this unexplained. Untraceable phone calls. The contradictory report details a sequence of events that doesn't align with observed facts. Specifically, it claims a vehicle was seen at the scene, a dark sedan, license plate partially obscured at 2 a.m. However, traffic camera footage from a nearby intersection, approximately 1.2 miles away, shows the same description of the vehicle passing through at 2:03 a.m. That's a 3-minute window to travel over a mile from the crime scene, navigate local roads, and clear the intersection without any discernible signs of speeding. What doesn't add up is the consistent speed limit in that area, 25 miles per hour. At that speed, the journey would take closer to 5 minutes, possibly more if factoring in acceleration and deceleration. This isn't a small inconsistency. The report suggests a speed that would be illegal and, frankly, reckless, yet there's no mention of erratic driving. The witness statement in the report indicates the driver was calm and collected, which further complicates the narrative. How does a driver maintain composure while exceeding limits, covering ground that quickly, and then appear unremarkable? This raises an important question. Was the witness truly accurate in their timing, or was the traffic camera, an objective record marking a different reality? The discrepancy in time and distance could be an innocent mistake, or it could point to something far more deliberate, a subtle manipulation of the timeline, and this initial misdirection, however small, could be foundational. Because if this detail doesn't fit, what else might be inaccurate in the official record? Financial irregularities. The absence of these calls is itself a kind of evidence, a hole in the data where information should be. We're told a frantic search was underway, yet the primary means of communication, the victim's own phone, remained silent after 2:17 a.m. This lack of outgoing or incoming activity for hours, for days, presents a significant problem for any reconstruction of those critical first hours. It suggests either an immediate incapacitation or a deliberate decision not to use the device, either by the victim or by someone else. And that raises an important question. If the phone was found later, discarded in a location far from the last ping, who made the decision to turn it off or to silence it permanently? The records show no further activity, no attempts to reach out, no frantic calls for help. That's not a small inconsistency, particularly when we are dealing with a person in distress. The paper trail tells a different story than a simple disappearance. It speaks to a sudden absolute cutoff. And the details surrounding that cutoff simply don't align with the official narrative. The unopened package. The financial irregularities we just examined, unexplained transfers, phantom invoices, they all connect back to a single question. Where did the money go? Or more precisely, where was it intended to go and where did it actually end up? This is where we need to look at specific transactions and the stated reasons behind them. We have a series of wire transfers, totaling nearly $750,000, marked in ledger entries as consulting fees to a shell corporation registered in an offshore tax haven. That's not unusual on its own for some legitimate businesses. But here's what's problematic. The dates of these transfers correlate almost exactly with significant capital injections into our primary subject's personal accounts. This synchronicity, the consulting fees leaving the company, and large sums appearing in personal accounts, it's a red flag. What doesn't add up is the total lack of documentation regarding the consulting work itself. There are no contracts, no project proposals, no deliverables, no communication logs, simply a series of withdrawals that vanish into this shell corporation and then resurface. When questioned, the explanation provided was vague, citing proprietary strategic advice for which there is now zero paper trail. That detail matters, because without it, these are not legitimate business expenses. They look like a mechanism for illicit fund diversion. The evidence suggests a deliberate obfuscation of the flow of money, and when money disappears and reappears this way, it always raises an important question. Who was benefiting from this intricate financial dance? Shifting statements. The unopened package, that's where we left off, a key piece of physical evidence, unexamined for weeks, perhaps months. What doesn't add up is the rationale behind this delay. If the package contained critical information, if it was directly linked to the developing events, why was it set aside? The evidence suggests a clear chain of custody should have been followed, especially in a case of this magnitude. But here, the paper trail tells a different story. Police logs indicate the package was inventoried, yes, but then apparently placed into a general storage area, not immediately flagged for forensic analysis. This raises an important question. Was its significance overlooked, or was there simply a failure in protocol? The witness statement from Officer Miller clarifies nothing, merely noting its receipt without further instruction. This lack of urgency, combined with what we know was later found inside, creates a profound contradiction in an already confusing timeline. This oversight, this simple failure to prioritize, opens up a critical window for evidence degradation, for vital clues to be missed in the crucial early hours of an investigation. That detail matters, because it directly impacts the integrity and the very foundation of the case built thereafter. Forensic anomalies. The inconsistency in the witness accounts wasn't just about the timeline, it also extended to key details about the vehicle itself. Witness A initially described a dark sedan, possibly black or deep blue with standard headlights. This was consistent with what many people might recall from a fleeting glimpse at night. However, when pressed for more specific details, something shifted. Witness A then mentioned the vehicle had what they believed were custom rims, a detail that hadn't come up before. Meanwhile, Witness B, who claimed to have a clearer view, described a silver or light gray compact car, emphasizing its smaller size and distinct custom fog lights, a very noticeable feature. Neither mention resonated with the other. One described a large, dark sedan, the other a small, light compact. The initial police report contained both statements, side by side, yet no immediate follow-up appeared to reconcile these stark differences. That's a critical oversight. If these witnesses were observing the same incident, how could their descriptions of the vehicle be so fundamentally different? This isn't a slight variation in color or a minor dispute over a timestamp. This is a complete contradiction in the physical description of the primary piece of evidence, the vehicle. This raises an important question. Were they truly seeing the same car? Or were they seeing something else entirely that night? Or perhaps not at all? The second car. The anomalies we've just discussed, specifically the unexpected presence of a particular compound on the victim's clothing and the peculiar burn patterns not consistent with the fire's intensity. These weren't isolated incidents. What doesn't add up is the official forensic report's dismissal of these factors, labeling them as inconclusive or environmental variables. But a careful look at the lab notes, available through a Freedom of Information request, reveals a different story. Internal communications show that lead forensic scientists flagged these exact points for further investigation. Yet, these flags were removed before the final report was disseminated. That detail matters, because it suggests a deliberate de-emphasis of evidence that contradicted a convenient narrative. It's not just an oversight, it's a pattern of minimizing any data that didn't fit neatly into the initial assessment. The witness said the fire started instantaneously, a flashover, but the forensic evidence suggests a slower, more controlled burn in specific locations. This raises an important question. Why would a meticulous forensic team highlight these discrepancies, only for them to mysteriously vanish from the official record? The paper trail tells a different story than the public pronouncements, and the contradiction is stark. This isn't just about what happened, but about what was allowed to be seen as happening. Undisputed journey. The presence of a second vehicle, especially one that leaves the scene minutes before any official response, complicates the narrative significantly. If we consider the possibility that a second car was involved, the focus shifts from a simple accident to a more deliberate act, or at the very least, an attempt to hide something. That's where it gets strange. The initial witness statements provided varied descriptions of this potential second vehicle, some recalling a dark sedan, others a lighter-colored SUV. These discrepancies, subtle as they are, become critical when trying to corroborate details. We refer back to the early police reports here. Notice how some officers' notes include mentions of tire tracks inconsistent with primary vehicle, while others make no such observation. This lack of uniformity in documentation suggests either oversight or perhaps a premature conclusion about the nature of the incident. This detail matters because a controlled crime scene should have consistent, thorough documentation of all potential evidence, regardless of its immediate perceived relevance. The official version leaves this unexplained, and it opens a significant gap in the initial investigation. What kind of evidence could have been missed in those crucial first hours simply because the focus was too narrow? Digital footprints fade. The journey itself, as far as confirmed movements go, appeared uncomplicated. From the moment the subject's vehicle was last seen on the municipal traffic camera, heading east on Elm Street, a recording that placed it at precisely 8:17 p.m., there was a consistent, if sparse, data trail. We have the toll booth record from Highway 7, scanned at 8:42 p.m., which corroborates the direction of travel. Then, the GPS ping from the subject's phone, placing it near the industrial park exit at 9:01 p.m. All of this lays a foundation of movement, creating a straightforward narrative. An undisputed journey, you might say. But here's where it gets strange. According to the repair shop's service log, the vehicle was brought in for an unscheduled oil change at 9:30 p.m. That's a 29-minute gap between a verifiable GPS location and the vehicle's arrival at the shop. The distance between the industrial park exit and the repair shop is a mere 3.2 miles. At an average city speed, that's a 7-minute drive, maybe 10 with traffic. So, where was the subject and the vehicle for those missing 19 to 22 minutes? It's not simply a matter of a few lost minutes, it's a significant deviation that doesn't align with the preceding precise movements. This isn't a small inconsistency. This creates a hole in an otherwise continuous timeline. The forgotten key. The fading digital footprints, as we explored, presented their own set of challenges: corrupted data, deleted logs, and incomplete server records. This pattern of obfuscation, whether deliberate or accidental, pushes us back to a less ephemeral form of evidence: the environment itself, specifically the weather. Now, why does weather matter? Because official statements, witness testimonies, and even personal accounts often include details about conditions. These details, when cross-referenced with meteorological data, can either corroborate a narrative or expose critical inconsistencies. Here's where it gets interesting. The police report states that the night of the disappearance was clear with a gentle breeze. Witness A, a neighbor, also recalled a starry, peaceful night. However, the National Weather Service archives for that exact date and location show something quite different. Record: a sudden, localized thunderstorm active between 11:30 p.m. and 1:15 a.m., accompanied by heavy rain and wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. That's not a small inconsistency. A stormy night with heavy rain makes visibility poor, affects travel times, and significantly alters a person's ability to observe details. If the night was truly clear, then these meteorological records are flawed. But if the records are accurate, then the official narrative, and at least one witness testimony, contain a significant error. And an error of this magnitude, one that directly impacts the environmental context of the event, raises an important question: why the discrepancy? What does a clear night versus a stormy one conceal or reveal about those crucial hours? Inconsistent weather. The discovery of a forgotten key, a detail that, on the surface, might seem insignificant, begins to unravel the careful construction of the official narrative. We have a locked door, a missing key, and a witness claiming immediate entry. This is where the timeline breaks down. The key was eventually found, not in plain sight, but tucked away in a place it shouldn't have been. That detail matters, because it directly contradicts the initial reports of forced entry or an unlocked door. If the door was indeed locked from the inside, and the key later discovered in an obscure location, it forces us to question the entire sequence of events presented. Why wasn't it with the victim? Why wasn't it in the lock? The official story suggests a straightforward break-in or an open-door scenario, yet the physical evidence of this key, its location, its condition, points to something far more deliberate, far more controlled. What doesn't add up is the ease with which this detail was initially dismissed, almost as if it complicated an already established conclusion. This single object, a simple key, now opens up a different set of questions about the moments leading up to the incident. Hidden camera footage. The official report makes no mention of any unusual atmospheric conditions at the time of the incident, listing only clear skies and mild temperatures. Yet, 3 distinct witness accounts from individuals within a 2-mile radius mention an unexpected, brief, but intense localized rain shower, almost a microburst, that occurred just minutes before the reported event. That's a significant discrepancy. Why would this detail, independently corroborated by multiple sources, be completely omitted? The weather, as we know, can drastically alter a scene, washing away crucial evidence, delaying response times, or even affecting visibility. If there was indeed a sudden downpour, it raises questions about everything from tire tracks to footprints, even the state of the ground where specific actions reportedly took place. We have the official log, which states perfect conditions, and then we have these 3 unconnected statements detailing a sudden heavy rain. This isn't a minor oversight. This is a contradiction that, if true, profoundly reshapes the environmental context of the entire incident. And what's more, that specific weather pattern, a highly localized, intense burst of rain, isn't typically noted by broader meteorological stations. It would have to be observed on the ground, by people who were there. The anonymous tip. The hidden camera footage from the convenience store presented a critical 5-minute window. We see an individual matching our subject's description entering the store at 10:12 p.m., purchasing a prepaid phone card, and leaving at 10:17 p.m. This timestamp, however, directly contradicts the initial police report, which states our subject was already at his residence, having arrived at 10:05 p.m. according to his own statement. That's a 7-minute discrepancy. 7 minutes where the official timeline simply doesn't hold. What doesn't add up is why this footage, clearly obtained from a publicly accessible store, wasn't cross-referenced more thoroughly from the outset. The phone card purchase itself raises further questions. Our subject claimed he was preparing for a quiet night in, yet he made an unscheduled trip for a burner phone card late in the evening. This detail matters because it introduces an element of premeditation or a previously unstated plan. The official narrative leaves this unexplained. It suggests a movement, a specific action, not accounted for in his initial statements, pushing the confirmed timeline back and casting doubt on the entire sequence of events leading up to the critical moment. Missing person profile. The anonymous tip, however convenient it seemed, leads us to a specific location, an abandoned warehouse on the industrial outskirts of town. Now, this is where the timeline shows its first significant strain. The official report states officers arrived at 3:17 a.m., but we have a recording from a local business, a security camera facing the main road, timestamped at 3:02 a.m., showing a cruiser fitting the description of the responding unit pass by. That's a 15-minute discrepancy. It may seem minor, but in a case built on precise timings, 15 minutes is a considerable gap. What were the officers doing during those 15 minutes? Was the entire response delayed, or did they arrive earlier and simply not report it? This isn't just about a police procedural oversight, it's about establishing the earliest moments of discovery. This small window could hold critical information about who was present at the scene leading up to the official entry. The evidence suggests that the story of their arrival, as documented, might not align with the true sequence of events. And that detail matters for everything that comes next. The untimely discovery. The official missing persons profile for Sarah Jenkins paints a picture of a quiet, unassuming individual, a student known for her dedication to academics, with no history of truancy or significant disciplinary issues. Her friends, when interviewed, consistently described her as reliable, a planner, someone who avoided spontaneity. They emphasized her aversion to risk, her careful nature. Yet the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, as presented by initial police statements, suggest a sudden, almost impulsive vanishing. What doesn't add up is the stark contrast between Sarah's established patterns of behavior, her routines, her meticulously kept schedule, and the abrupt, unplanned nature of her last known movements. The police report states she was last seen leaving a study group at 11:30 p.m., but security footage from the campus exit gates, reviewed by her parents' private investigator, shows no visual confirmation of Sarah at that time. Instead, a blurry image, timestamped 11:58 p.m., captures a figure wearing a similar coat, but the angle and resolution make definitive identification impossible. This small, crucial discrepancy in the timeline, the gap between the reported 11:30 p.m. departure and the 11:58 p.m. footage, raises an important question regarding the initial witness statements. Did the witnesses accurately recall the precise time, or were they influenced by what they believed should have happened? Parallel investigations. Now, the discovery of the body itself. Untimely, yes, but also unsettlingly obscured. The initial report states the remains were found approximately 1/2 mile off the main trail, deep within a dense thicket. But let's look closer at the search logs. Here's where it gets strange. Those logs indicate that area had been meticulously swept by search teams just 48 hours prior. Not once, but twice. With K9 units. So, the question becomes, how does a body in an advanced state of decomposition suddenly appear in an area already cleared by multiple trained teams? The official explanation centers on the density of the undergrowth, suggesting the body could have been simply overlooked. But the K9 units, specifically trained to detect human remains, even buried or concealed, registering no alerts in those precise coordinates. That detail matters. It leaves us with a significant gap in the narrative. Is it possible the remains were not there during the initial sweeps? And if not, when, and more importantly, by whom were they placed there? This directly contradicts the idea of an isolated incident, pushing us toward a more deliberate placement. A staging, perhaps. The timeline doesn't add up if we consider the prior thoroughness of the search operation. The unmarked grave. The parallel investigations, one official and one unofficial, often converged at critical points, yet consistently diverged on their interpretations of the same facts. While law enforcement focused on the immediate tangible aspects of the disappearance, the physical location, the last known movements, the independent inquiry began to sift through digital footprints and financial records, searching for patterns that might not be visible on the ground. This meant analyzing not just where the subject was, but what they were actively doing, who they were communicating with, and what financial commitments existed. The official report minimized the significance of certain online interactions, dismissing them as tangential. However, the private investigation found these interactions formed a crucial, repetitive chain, hinting at a structured, ongoing engagement that directly contradicted the narrative of a spontaneous, isolated act. For example, a series of encrypted messages initially overlooked revealed a consistent pattern of communication with an untraceable offshore account, a detail that the official inquiry failed to flag. That detail matters, because it paints a picture of premeditation and external involvement, rather than a solo, inexplicable departure. Motive unresolved. The implications of an unmarked grave, left to the elements for decades, are profound. It suggests not just a lack of care, but actively obscures identity, a deliberate act to erase. What doesn't add up here is the complete absence of any record for this particular plot. Every burial, even indigent cases, typically generates some documentation, some ledger entry, some connection to an individual. Yet, for this one, nothing. It's as if the ground itself was intended to be silent. This raises an important question. If the details of this specific grave are missing from all official cemetery logs, was it truly an official burial at all? Or was it something far more clandestine? A silent disposal disguised within the periphery of sacred ground. A grim anomaly in the historical records that begs for closer scrutiny. This detail matters because it points not to neglect, but to active concealment. The official version leaves this unexplained, and it's a silence that speaks volumes. The end summary. The absence of a clear motive, then, becomes a structural flaw in the official narrative, because motive often explains the how and the why. Without it, we're left with a series of actions that appear almost random, or, perhaps more accurately, profoundly unexplained. This brings us back to the question of intent. What was the driving force behind the events as they unfolded? The prosecution's case relied heavily on a reconstruction of opportunity, detailing how the individual could have committed the act. But the logical leap from could have to did often bypasses the crucial element of what would compel such an act in the first place. This is where the paper trail becomes even more vital. We need to search for any document, any record, any conversation that might hint at a deeper reason. A reason that would tie the sequence of events into a coherent whole. Currently, that piece of evidence remains elusive, and without it, the entire framework feels, well, incomplete. The official story implies a motive without ever fully demonstrating it, leaving a significant gap in our understanding of what happened. That detail matters, because without a compelling motive, the foundation of opportunity begins to crumble under scrutiny. Still searching answers. So, we return to the central question: what do we do with a timeline that simply doesn't add up? Throughout this entire review, we've seen discrepancies, overlooked details, and official narratives that, when weighed against the raw evidence, begin to fray at the edges. The key is in the smallest inconsistencies, the moments where the reported sequence of events diverges from documented fact, or where witness accounts refuse to align. Every case has its own clock ticking away, and when the hands move out of sync, it reveals a hidden structure. We've traced the path, examined the fragments, and what we're left with are not merely questions but logical consequences of those unanswered points. The official story stands, but its foundations remain questionable. This review closes this specific case file for now, but the questions endure. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. If you value this kind of meticulous breakdown, consider liking this video and subscribing to the evidence log for more deep dives. The next case awaits our scrutiny.